Welcome to Resiliency The Podcast. I am your host, Jenn Quader. I would like to introduce my beautiful, wonderful, brilliant, and amazing co-host, Dr. Kelly Culver. As always, happy to have you. So today we have a really interesting guest with an impressive resume in resilience. He has lived through the decimation of every cell in every bone in his body. Now that happened at the age of 34. When he underwent a bone marrow transplant in a hopeful last attempt to treat a persistent blood cancer. And it worked. Just 12 months later, much to the surprise of his medical team, he crossed the finish line of a triathlon. Since then, he's grown his skills in corporate communications, holding several positions in the healthcare sector. And today he draws on his earlier educational background in film and strategic storytelling to direct a pretty darn good podcast from what I've heard all around the world. Now, today's guest is a lifelong Californian. Oh, and right here in my script, it says his greatest accomplishment is his wife of nearly 15 years, Jenn Quader. Wow, what a surprise, my dear. Thank you, of course. So everyone, please welcome our own co-creator, producer, and today's guest, Mr. Asef Quader.
Hello.
Have a little more enthusiasm than that.
Well, I was told that I had to say that Jenn was my most, what's the word she used? Impressive.
Greatest accomplishment?
Greatest accomplishment. Yeah, greatest
I mean,
accomplishment under fear of physical abuse.
Yeah.
We can't put that out in the public sphere, my love.
Sorry. Jen is my greatest accomplishment, and I
Honey,
love her dearly.
be more resilient. Come on.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for making me do this. I appreciate it.
We're delighted to have you, and I'm not sure that we're making you do this. I'm going to do a real fast recap to our listeners. So for our listeners on Resiliency The Podcast, it is October 2024. I'm going to put a date in the sand. Jenn and Asef and I only met the end of March this year when we were in Paris, because Jenn and I were giving a TED Talk at the American University of Paris's Resilience Redefined. And we met, we gelled, we clicked, we said, we need to do a podcast. And it was Asef who went back to California, created the treatment sheet, and here we are. So we're having a conversation amongst family, and the road has been super fast and not very long. So with that intro, Asef, here's the question. What does resilience mean to you?
Ooh. What's funny is that when we did this, we started the podcast, when I sat down and wrote a treatment for what does the Resiliency The Podcast, I wrote an elevator pitch for this. And the elevator pitch was, you're standing on a cliffside overlooking the ocean, and you see a storm coming, and it's big and it's strong. And you see the lightning and the thunder and the rain and the waves are crashing. And when the storm hits you, everything in your life is going to be different. How are you going to be at the end of it? Are you going to be able to look around and smile and know that everything is going to be okay? And that, to me, is what resilience is. Resilience is knowing that when that storm hits, and there is always a storm in everyone's life, that when it passes, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. I think it's adaptability. I think it's knowing that there's community around you, that everything in life changes. Everything in life is different. Every day something changes, even little minuscule bits or a lot. But we live and we find happiness again, and it's going to be okay. To me, that's what resilience is.
It's a beautiful definition because like life, resilience is ever changing. What we need to face that storm might be different at different times in our lives. And you are someone who was diagnosed with cancer at a very young age. And so I want to bring you actually right down into the trenches. I kind of want to start there. And I want to ask, a little bit, if you could just start by giving us a little history. In your intro, we talked about how you reached this point of a bone marrow transplant, but what was your history in getting diagnosed with cancer? And then what was your reaction to that diagnosis at the time as you saw that storm approaching?
Well, the short history, the abridged history, is in 2008. Jenn and I had just met. I want to say maybe not even a year ago, in our early part of our relationship, and we were together in North Carolina. I was very sick, very ill. We didn't know what was going on. We went to a doctor, and the doctor said I had really severe allergies. They gave me some pills. I went home and threw those pills up. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor looking at Jenn. I'm like, I don't think it's allergies. We went to another doctor, and they did some blood work, and they said, oh, well, you know what? It's cancer. You hear cancer, and of course, the first thing that comes to your mind is some sort of fearfulness. But in my case, it was, of course, fearfulness, but it was also some relief, because I had been sick for a couple months and I didn't know what was going on. So when they first told me you have cancer, it was like, okay, great. Now we know what it is. What do I do? How do I attack this? What do I do? I am the type of person, I am not a woe is me type of person. So when someone tells me something that is kind of bad news-ish, I want to know how do we solve it? How do we solve the problem? I want to come up with a plan very quickly. Sometimes that's can be bad because I want to rush things too quickly. But in this case, it was, I need to form a plan to make myself feel better. So I wanted to just figure out what's the next step. How do we solve it? Let's go kill this thing. Let's go attack it with all we have. My fearfulness, funny enough, was I was scared to tell the people I loved, my family and my friends, because I knew that I didn't want to make them feel bad. And I know that they would feel bad when they heard this diagnosis. Jenn can talk more about that because she was there next to me during this time. And she was my bulldog. She was the one who was not only my support, but I mean, she fought tooth and nail for me during that entire stretch. In fact, she'll probably be able to tell you more of this story than I will, because as Kelly, I know you have a very big experience going through this battle as well. And you were the Jenn to your husband. And when you're going through cancer, you're going through these treatments, they ravage your body really well, and you forget a lot of things. The chemo can scramble your brain really good. Yeah.
I think that's a perfect segue, though, because chemotherapy and radiation and the way that cancer is treated. And this was something that was so fascinating to me while we did go through this. And I was beside you through all of this. And my eyes were really open. I mean, I can remember us walking we'd been referred to an oncologist, and we're sitting down and they're, taking his vitals. And they said, "Is this your first cancer?" And I was like, "Who said cancer?" We didn't even know that yet. We still felt so new, but you mentioned chemo. We're talking about this. The idea is, when you have a cancer in your body, you have to poison it. You have to put in poison that will actually kill this thing. And that is the real counterintuitiveness of of chemotherapy and radiation. So my question to you is, while you're in the process of, your body is being poisoned in order to heal, right? And you're feeling a lot of physical pain. I recall that very clearly, that every single chemotherapy has its own list of side effects that are just horrific, like a nightmare movie, just horrible things that happen to you physically. And so I want to ask you, on the topic of resilience, how did you balance your mental energy with that physical pain?
It's an interesting question. We've talked ad nauseum almost about how important community is in resilience, and having that community around you during that time was very important to me. Having you, Jenn, was important to me. My friends and my family who would call me every day, would come and visit, who would send me things, who would just give me notes of encouragement every day, was important. Knowing that you're loved and supported, so important. For me, there was something I did every day from almost as soon as I started going through chemo, through my bone marrow transplants, sitting in a hospital room for the 3 weeks alone, that I had to do every day. And that was inspire myself. And not just inspire myself, I wanted to get that kick of adrenaline every day. I needed to watch something. I needed to listen to something. I needed to be inspired to get that little juice going in myself. I don't know if there's any sort of medical evidence behind it or anything like that, but I really think that that little kick of adrenaline helped me every day. Every day. It really helped heal me. It helped inspire me. It helped battle the cancer. And people talk about this all the time. Cancer is a negative disease. It's a disease that feeds off negativity. If you feel sorry for yourself, if you're feeling negative, if you're feeling depressed, cancer feeds off that. So I needed to battle it, not with negativity, but with positivity and humor and laughter, and just not get bogged down with woe is me, or I feel bad today, I want to be depressed. And that's all fine. That's a natural reaction to cancer. It's hard not to get depressed when you are feeling worn down. But like I said, I got into a battle with cancer, and I know my friends will hear this and say, what's he talking about? I used to be a very competitive person. I don't feel I'm as competitive as I used to be, but when I get into a competitive mindset, I will not let you beat me. I will not let cancer beat me. So as soon as I get into a negative mindset, that competitive spirit would kick in, and I'd be like, nope, not today, cancer. I'm going to get myself inspired. I'm going to listen to something. I'm going to get this adrenaline pumping in me. I'm not going to let you beat me. Let's go.
And I think what you've just described for us, are some of the strategies that you used in order to remain resilient, become resilient as you moved through the journey that you were on. But Jenn, what question were you going to ask?
Well, what I wanted to, as he's talking about kind of the physical reactions and kind of how he stayed focused on the end goal. And I was really formulating a question, I think. So forgive me for taking a moment here, but I think what I'm trying to get to is there's so many people who fight this battle, and there are these daily things you have to look at. And I tend to ask a lot of our guests this question, but what was the carrot for you is what I want to ask. What was the end result? Meaning, were you trying to get to the cure, or were you trying to get just to the next hurdle? Like did you take it in phases? How did you mentally break down this huge disease, and make that competitive for yourself? Because so many people do get pulled under, with this type of thing.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a carrot necessarily, if there was a end goal other than beating cancer. That was the ultimate goal. But like I said in the very beginning, our relationship was very new. Our relationship we were in the golden age of our relationship, and it was a very gold age. That made it very easy to be positive during that time. I've told many people this, that when I was going through cancer, Jenn and I just moved in together. I was happy. I was really, really happy. I found the girl of my dreams. I sure I had cancer, but I remember being very happy. I remember it was hard not to be happy. I had a fantastic, talented, beautiful, smart lady who was in love with me. I was getting calls from my friends and family on the daily telling how much they love and believe in me. It was hard not to be like, this is pretty awesome. Life is pretty good. Sure, I have cancer. Sure, I have chemo, 3-4 times a day. But, the good outweighs the bad at this point. I was really happy. It was really easy to be positive during that time. The carrot was being in a relationship. The carrot was wanting to start a life with what was going to be my future wife. The carrot was that. Plus, because I'm a competitive person, the carrot was, to quote Game of Thrones, telling death, not today.
Well, and I think that is, because I want to kind of paint the picture too as I'm thinking about it, because it sounds so lovely from your perspective, meaning like the love was there. And I think that is true, that all of that was there. I equally feel like I've told people too, I feel like we had, Asef and I had our relationship backwards. So you tend to meet people who've been married for, 50 years, and they say, oh, well, we just went through this cancer battle together. Well, we did it like we had been dating for 7 months, and I remember very vividly the moment where we're still dating and like we are talking about treatment and what it's going to be. And I had to really sit and think, like, am I in for this or am I not? And I remember the visual for myself was like buckling up into a roller coaster, because I thought, this will be a roller coaster. Like, this will be very difficult. And it was extremely, extremely difficult, financially and just health and worry and like clean. You had to keep everything so clean because of germs. I mean, there's so many things that I want people to understand, because it really is so important that you understand how hard life is when you want to look at the lens of resilience. Because it's so easy to think, oh, well, that person's resilient just because they have it easier than me, but really, you just were able to kind of see some of the light in your life alongside having all that pain. And one of the points you brought up was humor. And I think that's a really important piece and something we should touch on. So I'll tell you a story, Kelly. I'll tell you, Dr. Kelly, I'm going to tell you this story while our listeners watch, because I think it's a fun one, because you have to have a little visual on this. So Asef, we'd be like, just hanging out, and chemo is one of those things where you this, you have it, you feel bad, but then the next week you're feeling okay until it's time to have it again. So we're in one of the feeling okay times, and he would sit on the couch and he'd say, oh, babe, would you get me that remote control? I have cancer. Every time. So he milked it.
Not just Jenn. I use that on everybody. Even past, after, like, I'll do it years later. Like, someone will be sitting in a chair. I'm like, can I sit there? I had cancer.
It's like, it's just your way.
If
It's
you have
your
the
way.
card, you got to play it.
Well, look, I want to frame it into a question, and it's this. I've also been through a lot of leadership training, and in those trainings, I've learned a lot. Like, to be a good leader, you actually can't take life too seriously. You can't hold so tight that everything has to be the way you want it. And so what I want to ask you is, you seem to have that quite naturally, this ability to look at a very serious storm and laugh in its face a little bit. I want to ask first, where did that come from? And also, secondly, can we talk about skillfully using humor?
Well, I think you have told me many times, I'm not sure if I use it skillfully.
Yeah.
Why I
Enter
asked the
married
question.
couple. Poor us.
Poor me. Feel bad for poor Asef.
He had cancer.
Yeah.
That's what his little face would do.
I don't know. I think where did it come from? You're probably in a self-protection sort of place that, probably sitting down with a therapist would help figure that out. But you definitely, I use humor as a defense mechanism. I think a lot of people do that. Passive aggressive, let's laugh at the face of danger, because what else am I going to do? I can't say that there's any sort of thing that happened in my life specifically that made me just a humoristic person. I kind of was just raised with some really good friends and family that we all love to laugh, and we have a good time laughing. And I like laughter. I like hanging out with people. I like being friendly with everybody. I firmly believe that my motto in life is don't be a dick. Life would be much better if everyone just had that motto in life. Like, you don't even have to be good. Just don't be a dick. Just be friendly to people. Give a friendly smile and a happy hello. Don't even need that much. To answer your question, I don't know. I guess I was born that way.
Well, I think one thing though, because we're talking about skillful use of this skill of humor, and I call you a humorist sometimes, because I think you have a natural sense of humor. But I also think that there's a real strategic element in here, and it reminds me of a quote that I once heard. And the quote said, "Sometimes my happiness is the source of my smile, and sometimes my smile is the source of my happiness." Meaning, sometimes we have to make ourselves laugh first, and then then the humor comes. And so what I think I'm hearing from you is that, while being aware that it could be overused in some situations, when you're in a difficult moment, sometimes cracking the joke, making the laughter happen, even if you don't feel like it, once you've laughed, you will begin to feel better.
Absolutely. I think there's the other side of it is in the face of a disaster. It's either if I don't laugh, I'm going to cry. So instead of showing that emotion of, and there is something of that where it's like, I can't let people see me cry. I have to be the strong man, or I have to show strength, and people see laughter as strength as opposed to crying, which shows weakness, which is not true in the least. But I think I was kind of raised with that. I definitely know that from my mother's side, that we were raised to do not show weakness. So the laughter is not weakness. So here I am laughing.
I like the comment that you made just a few minutes ago about, it's just live your life. Don't be a dick, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to pick up on that just for a minute, because there's a couple things I want to ask you. I have a friend in London in the UK, and he said, Kelly, where you are and what you're doing and the things that you've gone through, things you've achieved, you are at the point in your life where you have one rule. I said, what's that? no dickheads allowed.
Yes.
And he's right. And he's absolutely right. I think you reach that. So it's, don't be that, but I'm also not going to let that into my ecosystem because it's not going to be very helpful.
Right.
And you've talked about some of the strategies that you used. I use the word strategies around being resilient or learning to be resilient, and humor is one of them. And I love the story, Jen. But I have a question, and I guess it's on my own observation. Asef has mentioned earlier, my husband Peter also had cancer, and he passed away 3 years ago. And he had a 6-year journey that was, we did some amazing things, but this isn't about him, it's about you. But I want to ask a question based on my observation about him. And it's this. You learn things about yourself from your cancer battle, and I'd like to know what they are. But the second part of that question is, you are in that bubble. You described a beautiful bubble. Jenn was the protector. We were tiger mamas, both of us. You heard him, I'll kill you. Mm-hmm. And you can leave that in, editors, because that's how we feel. That's our job. And we protect you from all the crap that you don't need to be engaging with as you engage in this battle for your life. Yeah. And I think Jenn and I wear that as a badge of honor. And we're happy to have done that. But you come out of the bubble. So the treatment's done, it's all been successful, and then you have to get back into what life looks like, and your family isn't calling you every day to tell you that they love you. Your wife's not telling you that she loves you every day. She's expecting you to just get your game on
it, Kelly. Preach
and
it.
get back at it, and all of a sudden you go, what the hell just happened? How did you deal with that?
It's a good question. I think there was a bit of the return to normalcy was something that I was so desperate to get to that it was nice.
Yeah.
We've talked many times on this show that there is no such thing as a return to normalcy, right? That everything's changed after, just like at the beginning of this episode. There's a storm, and when it passes, everything's going to be different. And everything was different. But being able to go outside again, right? When I went through my bone marrow transplant, I had to be in a hospital room for 3 weeks. It was supposed to be longer. I went home. I had to be inside the house. And at the time we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Huntington Beach, California. Beautiful area, about a mile away from the beach. So I'm not complaining, except that I couldn't leave the house, couldn't step outside of the house for another 3 months. So when you talk about, like Jenn was saying, those goals, those little carrots, getting out of the hospital was one carrot. Getting back from getting into the house, then being in the house for 3 months, then stepping out of the house, being a step out of the house. And as these little victories occurred, you saw the drop off in what you were talking about. The messages start to die down and whatnot. People are feeling good. And there's something about that. There's something about, when you get these calls from people, it was them being scared. I remember when I first started getting the calls, I was consoling people. People were crying and I would have to be the one consoling them. I was the one going through cancer, but I was the one who was consoling these people, telling them it's going to be okay. Not the other way around. Which I was happy with. I was so not happy. I didn't, like I said, I was fearful of just that because I didn't want people to cry about me. I didn't want people to cry for me. So those notes of love and whatnot, as they were so encouraging, I know it came from a place also of being scared. So that fearfulness was dying down, which also encouraged me. Jenn not having to feel like she was the tiger mama, the bulldog, the one who had to fight for me daily, because she had so much stress on her, because she was the breadwinner. She had so much stress having to do everything. My job was to heal. Her job was everything else. So as I started to heal, a lot of that responsibility could start coming off her. So it was nice to not have to be taken care of mentally and physically, that I could start taking some of that burden away. The return to normalcy, the return to everyday life was hard only because I fought for 3 years doing this, and you battle and you're doing this over and over and over again. And the goal was to win, and to win was to go back to normal life. And I got to go back to normal life. So that made things a little bit easier.
When going through cancer, everything about yourself changes. The way your body looks and feels changes. The responsibilities, the daily responsibilities, as well as the job responsibilities you have come off of you. And then at some point, all of that has to come back as a reinvention of self. And so my question to you is what did it take for you? And maybe the word, I'm gonna go ahead and just riff for a minute, because I think the word reinvention may be what is hitting you wrong, because and it's a word I use a lot. I talk about reinventing because I'm a branding person. And I think that for me, I have to think about, where do I want to be? How do I want to show up in this? But perhaps it's just becoming who you were always meant to become, which I think is our journey in this life. So the question is, as you go through a time where your body changes how it looks, how it feels, as your job responsibilities change, as all of this happens, like, what does it take for you to then become a whole person again, to become who you're going to be without that baggage, without those insecurities, without those things?
Well, what I'll say is this: at the end of everything, at the end of the cancer, and everything was fine and dandy, knock on wood. People ask me, how did cancer change you? Did you become a new person? What did you see life in new ways? Are things sweeter, or does the air smell fresher? Things like that. And the short answer was no, but only because I liked who I was before. And I think who I was before helps me beat cancer. I was a person who loved my family, loved my friends, loved meeting new people, loved traveling, loved sharing a smile. I loved life. I think that helped me overcome cancer. And when I got through cancer, I still loved life. I loved life going through cancer. I loved life after going through cancer. I love life now. I think that helped me to, like I said, to overcome. So I didn't feel like I became a new person at the end of cancer. I think there are some, PTSD that I go through at times. I think there are things that I cover up a lot because you don't want to relive it. But in terms of, coming out of cancer and being a new person or a new man, I don't necessarily think the disease made me do that. I think there are things that I learned from being with you, Jenn, things that I learned from just growing up and experiencing things, but I liked who I was before cancer. I like who I am now.
You know why you're having trouble answering the question? Because you didn't lose yourself. Yeah. So there was no new self to find. You never lost yourself. You kept yourself as a constant that whole way through. And so, yes, there may be some reinvention around the edges because normal is different, right?
Yeah.
So we reimagine what that new life looks like. But you never lost yourself. So there was no new identity to create because you're still you. A lot of people who come through a life-changing disease, it doesn't necessarily have to be cancer. It could be something else, feel that they have to become someone new, or they feel that society expects them to be someone new. And so they go through this soul searching to try and create a new identity where it's like, but I'm still that same person. You don't have to walk across the street to the other side of the street to avoid me. You can still talk to me. I'm the same person I always was. I haven't changed. And so if you look at me through eyes where you think I have changed, I've lost myself, I have to have a new self. In some ways that's not recognizing the achievement that I have had in coming through this disease, but you're forcing your perception that somehow I'm different. I'll give you a different example. I'll say it in a different way. I don't have a husband. I'm a widow. I hate that word. Do you know why? I wear it as a badge of honor because I am so proud to have been married to my husband. And I think, well, I'm not a widow. I'm just not married to him anymore because he's not physically here. Because people look at you through interesting eyes. They have a vision of what you should be and look like based on that word. Yeah. That was the point I was trying to make.
Yeah. And so beautifully said. Go ahead.
And I'll say that we've talked on this podcast before about being shoved into this keyhole of what definitions of things mean. And I've said before, I don't like being called a cancer survivor.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
It's yes. Not, that it was one part of a journey that I went through, and I'm proud that I survived cancer. I'm proud of the work that I put in to be where I'm at now, very healthy, that I keep working daily to achieve. But when people throw you into that box of cancer survivor, I don't know. There is part of me that feels like people give you some sort of puppy dog eyes when they hear that.
Yeah.
They feel sorry for you, and it's, I appreciate it, but it's not my end all be all story. I don't like being subject to being any one thing.
Okay, but let's pivot to community though, because now let's get in it, right? Because if you don't identify that way, then no one knows that you are. And then how do the people who might need you and need your story, outside of listening on Resiliency the podcast, of course, but how do people find you? Where does that intersection of identity and not wanting to be identified with the disease meet the opportunity to connect with others who either have gone through or are going through? How do you maintain that community while also maintaining that detachment?
Talking to people, being curious about people. I think I don't go out and say, I'm a cancer survivor, talk to me. But, I play a lot of golf, much to Jenn's chagrin. Actually, probably the opposite. She doesn't want to play golf, so she can be alone.
He's right.
And so I meet a lot of people on the golf course, and we'll talk, and someone will say, I'm battling cancer, or I had cancer, and instantly I start to have a conversation and we start talking. Cancer is an interesting thing because people who haven't gone through cancer don't know. It's a story that you can try to tell people, but if you haven't been through it, if you don't know it, it's something that is so hard to describe. It's very hard to talk about. So I don't talk about it with everyday people because it's not an easy thing to delineate. But if you are going through it or have gone through it, I am happy to talk, and we will talk story, and we will share battle stories and and it's easy to talk to with people who've gone through it. No, I don't advertise it to most people because it turns into me, I feel like I'm telling a sob story, and I don't want to share a sob story. I will share my war stories with people who have gone through it. And that is very easy. And, when you start doing that, you start, people know, and I obviously, many people know that I went through cancer. I went through it for so many years. Everybody knows that I went through it. So when people do know somebody who has cancer or is going through it, they will connect me. And I've talked to many people, and I've tried to help many people go through that battle that they're going through, and try to help as much as I can. It's such a personal battle that as much as I've gone through, I can give you my stories and give you advice and whatnot. But cancer is such a personal battle. It's hard to hear it from somebody's point of view and take anything from it, if that makes sense.
It does. I think what I take from what you're saying is that the shared experience is an important piece of it. And so while you don't need to advertise, hey, I'm this or that, when you either find someone or encounter or are referred to someone who has that shared experience, there's a common language. I would equate it to, like, just since I know this episode is about cancer, but just to kind of, everyone is going through their own thing. I think of, I have a dear person I love who is going through neurodivergence in her family. And she'll say, like, you don't understand what it's like to have these therapists in the house and do these things. Well, yeah, I don't. But anyone else who's gone through that neurodiversity journey will, and so I think it's a similar thing that when you've gone through whatever that is just makes your life, need to work a little differently, and got to kind of go through the different holes and through the different pockets. Once you have that experience, to be able to connect with someone who's gone through it similarly, like you said, you don't have to fill the gaps, you don't have to fill the holes as much.
Yeah. And to give an example, I think Jen, you and Kelly can relate more to each other through your shared cancer stories than I ever could. Because you went through things that I only saw but could never imagine. Kelly, the same way. You guys fought tooth and nail, and I don't know what that's like. And I thank you, Jen. I mean, you saved me. How many of my friends have said that I would die? I'd be dead if Jen wasn't in my life. And it's true.
I agree.
I firmly believe that. I firmly believe it. And all joking aside, I 100%, I would not be here if Jen wasn't in my life.
Well,
100%.
I can speak to that because I agree with that, but I think it's not just Jen. Thank you. But I also think that, that's about being an advocate for people. And I will leave my comments about the American healthcare system right here in front of everyone. And that is to say that it's hard to navigate. It's difficult to navigate. It's difficult to remember what scan was what. And again, without any, because every doctor and every nurse that helped us wants to help us. That's not it's not against them. It's just that they have a lot of patients and a lot of things. And so you do have to have an advocate or be an advocate, one or the other. You have to be an advocate for your own health, no matter what country you live in, no matter where you are. And so I think that that you're right. Us having a partnership within that did help each other, because I was able to kind of keep track of the details, and and you were able to focus on the healing part, which I think is really important.
Absolutely.
And you were able to keep a positive mindset, throughout that, which again led to some of that resilience.
Let me ask you about, what happened next. So that here on Resiliency, the podcast, we talk about the resilience trinity, which is being able to persist and survive, adapt and stay on track, and leap ahead and transform, change the track. You were released from hospital, and you were told you would never, ever, 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 ever run a triathlon again. And in pure Asef form, 12 months later, you said, the heck with that. I am so not listening to that. And you did. Tell us about that. And did that change the definition of resilience that you had held through your cancer treatments?
So backstory here. I had run a triathlon before, and I had bought a very expensive bike.
It's all about the bike.
And I told myself when I bought the bike, I can't just run one triathlon. If I'm spending this much money on this bike, I have to do at least two.
Bloody bike.
Then shortly thereafter, I got diagnosed with cancer. Cut to a couple years later when I have to get a bone marrow transplant, and we're in the room with the doctor before I go in for doing the transplant. And we're asking him all the side effects, all the things that are going to happen to me. And there's a litany of them. I ask him, do you think I will ever run a triathlon again? And he looks at the chart and he looks at me, he's like, I don't think so. And in my brain, I thought, fuck you. I'm going to run a fucking triathlon again.
I just bought this bike.
I bought the bike.
Damn it.
Sir, you don't understand.
It was the competitive spirit that kicked in. He told me I couldn't do it. And I was like, oh yeah? Okay. Let's see what happens. And that's when, I told you I got out of the hospital earlier than what they said. Originally he sat there and said, it's going to be 6 weeks to 2 months. You're going to be in this room. No one can see you. No one can be in there. Your wife can be in there, but she has to wear a mask the entire time. And I remember saying that. And I remember thinking, I'm doing this in 3 weeks. And I was like, I'm doing this in 3 fucking weeks. Pardon my language, everybody.
And it did.
And I did. I absolutely did. I stood true to that, getting that adrenaline running every day. Every day I held true to that one thing. I'm getting out of here in 3 weeks. And then I'm going to do my 3 months at home. And as soon as I'm done with that 3 months at home, I'm training. I'm training for this triathlon. I'm going to do this triathlon. And it was about 12 months. I think it might have been like maybe 13 months after I got out of the hospital. I think we got out of the hospital in March of 2010. Mm-hmm. And we did the triathlon in April of 2011. And Jenn joined me. Jenn did it.
I did it too.
Oh, wow.
I did it. Yeah, I finished. That's all we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about how long it took. We're not going to talk about anything else, but I did finish.
Excellent. Good girl.
But it was, we talked about the carrot before. We talked about the goal. It was the overarching theme. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to have this goal in mind, and I'm going to focus on that goal. And I'm not going to stop focusing on that goal, because that's one of the things that's going to help me get through this. Every little thing that works towards that goal is going to help me get through this.
Yep.
Yeah. And I want to comment real quick on your adrenaline strategy. You said earlier in the episode, I don't know if there's anything that backs this up, but this is what I found, is that if I got my adrenaline running every day, it makes me think of, Anthony Robbins has all of his seminars and everything. And I grew up with that motivational background. And when you attend his seminars, when you start, like, you all come in, everybody pays their thousands of dollars and they're all in their business suits, and he's like, get up on your chair. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, get up on your chair. And he wants you to stand up on your chair. And then he has you like jump up and down and move. And his whole idea is you have to get yourself in a state of being. And it's interesting because Dr. Kelly Culver Dr. Kelly Culver, why don't you jump in and tell me what does that make you think of?
Well, you asked me what's my definition of resilience. And resilience is a state of being.
State of being.
There's no verb.
No verb. And this is where it's so interesting, because what you clued into was this idea of like getting your body moving. I'd like to point out, it wasn't always your body, because when you are having those chemo, it's not like Asef could get up and move around. So he had to physically do that. And I remember there was this one night, during that 3 weeks in the hospital, where the doctor called me, forgive me, but you rarely see the doctor when you're in the hospital. You know, you see the hospital attendant, you see the nurses, but you don't always see your cancer doctor. And his cancer doctor called me at like 3 o'clock in the morning in the hospital. And I get on the phone and he's like, and I knew something was going on, but I didn't quite know what. And he said, his blood pressure has gone way too low and I'm going to have to put him in the ICU. You have to wake him up and make him mad. I was like, what? Like, are you kidding me? Like, he's been tortured through all this stuff. He's hurting it. And I remember having to wake him up, but it just correlates with this skillfulness is what I'm thinking, which is this idea, whether it's the Anthony Robbins, I'm healthy and well and I'm jumping on my seat, or whether I'm in my hospital bed and I'm thinking of something, whatever can bring that blood pumping. You know, that is what that doctor said, get his blood pumping. Because if not, he's going to go into ICU. And if he goes in ICU, he may not come out. And so it was really a critical time, but such an interesting strategy to look at in the aftermath. And with that, I'm going to turn it to our last question. When I say last, it's not really our last. Stick with us, listeners, because we got some good stuff coming up just after. But what I want to ask is, you know, we talked about the resilience trinity, and that plan and adapt and transform. And transform is the last part of that, and that is really a forward-looking place. And so, what I want to ask is, what's next for Asef? What's next in your resilience journey? What is ahead for you?
What is ahead for me is the Resiliency The Podcast. Jenn and myself have started a media company. We are all media, all productions, Anti-Lulu Productions. There's many different names for it.
Anti-Lulu. Oh, that's
Anti-Lulu. It's Anti-Lulu Productions is the name of the company, but we call it for our own, you know, we registered it as all incorporated, but Anti-Lulu Productions.
Yeah. So we're going strong, trying to preach resiliency, trying to preach inner light, trying to preach being good to one another, finding yourself, being helpful in this world, being a light to this world, being a beacon. That's what's next. It's just about putting out good in the world. That's what's next. Putting out as much good as possible.
Good. So you're going to spearhead the movement. That's what you're doing. You're spearheading the movement. And I like that. I like that a lot.
Kelly, tell our listeners more about the movement so they know what to look forward to. Just whatever you're able to share.
Sure. Well, you know, we all believe that we talk about resilience and resiliency a lot, and we want it to become a movement. And there's lots of moving parts in this. So Jenn and Asef have talked about Anti-Lulu media and creations and looking at this as, you know, positivity and light through different forms and different channels. And I have a company now in the UK called the Resilience Trinity Limited with a colleague, and we're working with companies and countries on building resilience and resilient capacity. But next year, and we'll talk more about it later, we're looking at having a resilience festival in London, England. And it's the start of the resilience movement. And I'm not going to say any more than that because it'll be a teaser, and, you know, so there you go. That's where
Look, you've given me the teases. I have the goosebumps, as they say. Really, guys, it's exciting. It's real, and what I can tell you is that, you know, it's a good time to be talking about resilience because we need it. I think there's not one of us that hasn't looked at the news and felt that pit in our stomach. And this is the answer. The answer is light and openness and developing this state of being. So I have really Dr. Kelly Culver to thank, and really Asef Quader to thank for kicking it through that cancer battle so that you could fly to Paris, watch us do some TEDx's, and help us turn together, the three of us really shaping this resilience journey and movement together. It's really an honor, and it's really exciting.
It's been a blast. It really has. It's not that long period of time. You know, this is all pretty short. But I want to know, Asef, you're a bit of a nerd, and you've said to me that I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to Star Wars. I can't believe you said that to me. Yeah, but so what's your favorite movie or TV show that makes you feel resilient? It better not be the same one as I said.
It's not. It's not the same. It's hard because, listen, this question is hard because I've helped write these questions, and I probably could give you 100 different answers. I was a film major in college, and we could just have an episode on this.
Get to the answer. You've known this question for 4 months.
And tomorrow it's going to be a different answer.
I don't care.
Just whipping it. Just whip, whip, whip. Get those guests in order, girl.
So right now I feel like, I'd want to say like the Shawshank Redemption, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like you guys are my wardens, and I need to escape and get to say Watanejo on a beach somewhere with a nice tropical drink.
Well,
yes,
good luck
we
with
are
that.
The wardens. So
good luck with that. With that tunneling. Have a good time. Enjoy. We'll have a drink down the street. Ain't gonna happen.
Yeah,
we caught you.
Happen. Yeah, you got the American warden and the Canadian warden. You are so screwed.
I like, that's a good resilience movie. Citizen Kane, I don't know, for some reason that always speaks to me. I love movies that are resilient in the way of me decompressing, me laying in bed and watching some stupid movie. I love holiday movies. When Christmas time comes up and we're right around the corner, I love having Jen and I do our Christmas movie marathon day, which I always have to include 2 movies, which are Christmas Vacation and Home Alone. Always make me feel resilient, cozy, and happy. Those come to mind. Those 4 movies. I'm sure there are a billion more, Kelly. There are a billion. All of the movies.
What about your song?
Same answer. A billion. What comes to mind? There are a couple. Okay, so the song that Jen and I walked back up the aisle to after we got married, "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey. Mm-hmm. I listened to that when I was in the hospital bed a lot. It actually might be why we walked back up to it during our wedding. That song, I like. "Welcome to the Black Parade" by My Chemical Romance. That song gets me going. There's a Avid Brothers song that I'm blanking on now. Hold on, I have to look it up real quick. Someone edit this. What's the Avid Brothers song that I like that always kind of gets me going, but in the opposite way? It's a weird sensation where I feel very calm and collected, and it makes me think of the good things in life and makes me think that everything's going to be fine and good and dandy. The Avid Brothers song is "No Hard Feelings." That song always gets me feeling very happy, in a very, if you haven't heard the song, listen to it. I would definitely think you should. It's one of those songs where I think I would want that played at my funeral.
All right, note to self.
There you go.
I'm writing that down.
What's the last thing that made you laugh out loud?
I don't know why this is the hardest question. My friends, a very good friend of mine was in here from London over the weekend. David London from London was in town, and we all got together and we had a little game night like we always used to do when we were together. David was one of my best friends, is one of my best friends. I've known him since the 7th grade. And then all our friends, I'm very lucky, talking about community again, that all of my friends, I've known them for at least 25 years, at least maybe more now, probably closer to 30, 40 years. I guess I aged myself. We all got together, and this was just over the weekend, and just playing games. And you sit there and you tell story and you talk and you say nonsensical things, and it just makes you laugh and happy.
What's a question you'd like to leave for a future guest?
Do you know how many times I've asked myself this question and how many questions I've had? When you're in need of feeling resilient, what is your go-to food and or beverage?
Fun.
I like that.
I like that.
Yep.
Oh, all right, that's a good one. Okay, well, I have a question for you from a prior guest here on Resiliency, the podcast. It is not food related, so I like yours because it is food related. We'll keep
Boo.
that for another one. I know, right? No food in this one, but it is technology related because we all live in a technology enabled world. So the question is, what is your favorite technology of self? And by technology of self, we mean what app or practice or skill or software, what do you use to connect with yourself?
To connect with self. Ooh, this is a hard one. I didn't think you're going to give me this one. Oh man. To connect with self, I don't know. I play a lot of video games. And I like playing video games because I play with my friends and we play online. So my PlayStation 5, I like to get on, and it's a great communication tool. I get to connect to people who I wouldn't normally see, who live in different parts of the world, who I can just sit down and we'll play video games for hours and we'll talk and we'll play. And it's just a fun way to connect and to keep my sanity at times and to decompress and to forget about the day. There's some things about playing a game with friends that just makes you forget about what's going on in your world, and sometimes that's really nice and keeps me sane. So my PS5 is really fantastic for that.
I would like to say that, Asif, you've just been given a dream answer for all of the children of our listeners who are in that 12 to
Yes.
13 range, because if a PS5 is the best technology of self, that's the greatest argument for that as a Christmas gift that I've ever heard. So parents,
Well,
give that some thought.
I,
Technology
I
of the
grew up
self.
I grew up with video games. I started, and really going to age myself here. The first gaming system I had in my house was the Atari 2600, and I pretty much had every gaming system thereafter in my household or near me playing games. Um, like Dr. Kelly, I am a bit of a nerd. Um,
She's
I
like, don't pull
can't
me in that.
believe you used that word again with my name.
how dare you
You are too much.
Dr.
get
Kelly is
my
the
doctor's name out of your mouth?
That's
Dr. Kelly is the coolest cat around. You cannot call her
I
a
think
nerd. She's a
nerd
cool
culture is
cat.
cool. Nerd culture is what's in right now.
Have you heard her playlist? She's cool as heck. Come on now.
Oh, that's what it says. Hey, Dr. Kelly, you know what I was listening to just yesterday that got me feeling very resilient?
Rolling Stones, Give Me Shelter.
Chicago.
Chicago
Chicago
Transit Authority.
25 or 64. Put that on the list of
Oh,
songs that make me
man.
feel resilient.
Yes,
Do 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 do
exactly.
do. That song gets me going.
Yeah, you can't not dance.
One of the most underrated guitar solos in that song.
Mm.
We could have another
Okay.
podcast on music if you want to. I can go all day on that.
Another time, another time.
Another
Okay.
time.
Okay.
In the meantime, Asif, what a one.
Resiliency. Sorry.
What?
I was going to say another spin-off. Resiliency, the music podcast.
There you go. Another spinoff. Exactly. Well, Asif, thank you. As always, you have brought a lot of light and fun and humor to the conversation, and you also really openly shared this really difficult journey of yours. So thank you so much. I do want to ask before we wrap up, is there anything we didn't ask you that you want to be sure that the listeners of Resiliency the podcast know?
I would say if you are going through a battle, cancer, any sort of other health related issue, any sort of mental related issue, the key is never giving up. It's never giving up. It's finding your group, finding your community, finding support that will help you through that if you don't have it already. But finding some mental stability, finding your way through it, and even if that's just taking a small step forward, never giving up. It's fantastic what we are capable of as humans, as long as we don't give up that fight. Always fight, never give up, always battle. That's what I would say. That's what I want people to take from this, that I never give up, and I will never give up. And as long as you keep doing that, things will get better. That storm will pass and things will be different and you will be better for it.
I see you up on that cliff and that storm has already passed, and when you don't give up, you're still on the cliff and you're still going. Well, we are so grateful to have had you as a guest today. It's such a treat to have you in that chair. I wonder if you'd let our listeners know where they can find and connect with you, please.
They can always find me somewhere in the background of Resiliency the Podcast. You can find me on the socials at asefquader.com, ASEFQUADER, not .com, at Asef Quader. Yeah, you'll find me there.
Beautiful. And as always, you can find me, Jenn Quader, at Jenn Quader on all the socials. That's at JENNQUADER. You can find me at jennquader.com or thesmartagency.com. You can find our wonderful, amazing, brilliant, not a nerd, super cool cat, Dr. Kelly Culver, online on LinkedIn and Instagram at Dr. Kelly Culver, or on her website, theculvergroup.ca. Again, that's .ca for Canada. And of course, the most important girl in the room, the best thing we could even do for ourselves is to follow Resiliency the Podcast, the beautiful, beautiful podcast that we've created. You can find us at resiliencythepodcast.com or on any of the channels where you typically listen to podcasts. And as always, we thank you so much for listening. You guys are an important part of our lives and our resilience journey. We are so grateful to have you as listeners. Please do subscribe, like us, and we will look forward to seeing you back here next week for another episode of Resiliency the Podcast.